Hey guys, Miss Fearing here. Welcome to Unit 5 Notes 1. We're going to start a brand new unit today talking about quadratics. So the first thing we're going to start looking at is knowing the different pieces of a quadratic. So we're going to look at the shape it makes, which is called a parabola, and then all those different parts that we need to be able to find of this parabola. So when I am looking for a quadratic equation, I'm looking for an equation in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So my a value is the one with the x squared, and this squared is actually what makes this a quadratic. So anytime you see something with a square, that means that it's going to be a quadratic. So my a value is going to be my thing with the x squareds. My b value is going to be the thing with the x's, and the c is just going to be our constant, or the number without any variables with it. So if I go ahead and graph this thing, we call this, the shape it makes, a parabola. So the graph of this thing is called a parabola. So the first point that we're going to look at on this parabola is the thing called the vertex. The vertex is our starting point. So if I ask you to graph a parabola, you always want to find the vertex first. The other thing I want you to understand is that the vertex is really just the high or the low point of this parabola. So that's the lowest point that this parabola hits is at that vertex right there. And the highest point that this parabola hits is at the vertex up at top. So those are actually our minimum and our maximum as well. So when you are asked to find the minimum or the maximum, you're really just looking at what is the vertex of the parabola. I can then ask you to find the axis of symmetry. So parabolas are symmetric, which means that I can flip it over a line and it'll lay on top of itself. And the line that I can flip it over is called the axis of symmetry. So to find this axis of symmetry, it's actually just the x value or the x coordinate of the vertex. So when we're looking for axis of symmetry, we're looking for an x equals equation. When I ask you to find the y-intercept then, we have heard this term before, only we've heard kind of x-intercept, and that's where we're looking at where it crosses the x-axis. So a y-intercept is just where looking for where does it cross the y-axis in this situation, and we can find that easily when we're in standard form. So remember ax squared plus bx plus c. Our y-intercept is just the c value. It's just the constant. The other thing we can tell by this equation is if the graph is going to open up or down. So we can tell that by looking at the a value. If a is greater than 0, so if a is a positive number, it's going to open up. If a is a negative number, it's going to open down. So go ahead and kind of make note of that to yourself. You really want to know, again, if this opens up, down, we want to be able to find the y-intercept. And then next we're going to talk about how we find those axes of symmetry and that vertex. So we talked about what the vertex of a parabola was, but now we want to talk about how to find the vertex. So first things first, we want to make sure that we are in standard form. If we're not in standard form, so remember standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. If we're not in standard form, we need to get it into standard form first. So this y should either be a y, it could be a 0, any of those things, but it cannot be a number. Once we're in standard form, then we want to write out what is a equal, what is b equal, and what is c equal. From there then, to find the x-coordinate, we use this equation, and it's really important that you remember, this formula. So it's really important that you remember this formula. X equals the opposite of b divided by 2 times a. Okay, so we're going to go through an example here in a little bit. But once you find what x equals, anytime you know x, all you have to do is plug it back into the equation then to find the y value. Your last step, remember, is your vertex is a point. It's a high point or it's a low point, but it's a point. So you need to write it out as a coordinate point. So we talked about what all of these pieces are off of a parabola. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at finding the different pieces. So I'm going to look at the first example, y equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 3. I am already in standard form, so I'm going to go ahead and write what my A equals, my B equals, and my C equals. So A is the coefficient with the x squared. B is the coefficient with the x's. And C is just your constant, the number without any variables. So from there, we can go ahead and we can think, does this open up or does it open down? And to do that, we're going to look at the A value. So remember, if the A value is positive, then we know that this thing opens up. I'm going to skip down then, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the max or the min. Is this a max or is this a min? So I know that I have a parabola that looks like this. It opens up. So this down here is my vertex, and my vertex ends up being a low point. It's the lowest point on the parabola. So that means that it's going to be a minimum. So next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to find the y-intercept next, because that's the one that's least amount of work for me. So from there, the y-intercept, remember, is just your c value. It's just your constant. So in this situation, it's going to be a -3. Next, we want to go ahead and we want to find the vertex then. So the vertex is going to have me do a little bit of work here. Remember, first things first, we need to be in standard form. Well, we are. We check that. We need to then write A equals, B equals, C equals. We did that. So now we're going to go into using the formula x equals the opposite of B divided by 2 times A. So if I do this, the opposite of B, so the opposite of 8 is -8, divided by 2 times A, which is 2. So I get -8 divided by 4, which is going to equal a -2. So I know in my vertex the x value is -2. And now to find the y value, I'm going to plug that back into the original equation. The y equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 3. So I'm going to be 2 times -2 squared plus 8 times -2 minus 3. And you can plug this all into your calculator just like you see it, or you can do it piece by piece. But remember, if you do it piece by piece, you have to do exponents first before you multiply. So we actually would need to do the -2 squared first and then multiply it by 2. So you would end up getting 8 minus 16 minus 3. So I would end up getting a -11, and that would be my y value of my vertex. So then the only thing we haven't actually finished yet is the axis of symmetry. Remember, our axis of symmetry goes through our x value of our vertex, and it's going to be an x equals equation. So since I know that x is -2, x is going to be -2. So let's go ahead and look at example number 2. I have y equals -3x squared minus 6x plus 4. So I'm going to start with writing my A equals, my B equals, and my C equals. So A is with the x squareds, B is with the x's, C is the constant. From there, I go ahead and I look at if it opens up or down. Well, since A is negative, I know that it's going to open down. I then go ahead and look at a max or a min. So if this opens down, it's a frowny face. It looks like that, which means my vertex is all the way up at the top. So that would make it a maximum. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at my y-intercept. My y-intercept, remember, is just the constant or the c value, which is 4. And now I'm going to do all the work. So I'm going to start with the vertex. Remember, we start with the x equals opposite of b divided by 2 times a. So the opposite of -6 is 6 divided by 2 times a -3. So I get 6 divided by -6, which gives me a -1. So I know that the x value is -1. And I'm going to plug that into the original equation now for all of the x values. And I'm going to solve for a y value. So I'm going to end up getting a -3 plus 6 plus 4. So y is going to end up being 7. So my axis of symmetry is just the x value of the vertex. So x is going to equal -1. So for the next 2 examples, I'm going to go ahead and get you started with finding the A, the B, and the C, and then have you do the rest of the work and then come back and check your answers. So for example number 3, our a value is the coefficient in front of the x squared. So remember, there is a number there. It's an imaginary 1. My b value is the one with the x's, so it's 2. And then my c value is the constant, so it's 18. Looking at number 4 then, example number 4, I have y equals 2x squared plus 16. So again, a is going to be the number with the x squareds. Well, there's a 2 there. B is the number with the x's. I don't have any x's in there, so since I don't have any, the number would be a 0. And then our constant, the one of no variable, is going to be 16. So go ahead and go through and find if it opens up, down, the axiosymmetry, the vertex, the y-intercept, and then if it's a min or a max. And then come back and check your work before moving on to the practice. So here are the answers I got. Double check your work. If you got anything wrong, please come talk to me before moving on to the practice. Good luck.